And now we prepare for the next session. So we have Katherine MacGregor and Lindsay Fraughton they are the MEC alumni, and they'll be presenting technology-enabled learning for staff at Mountain Equipment Company. Thank you for coming, and please take it away. And I will stop sharing my screen. There you go. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us here today. I have lost my co-presenter, Katie. Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I crashed as soon as I was highlighted. Hello, everyone. Lindsay, are you able to share your screen? Can someone thumbs up me that you can hear me?
Yes.
Oh, amazing. Okay, I will go ahead and share my screen. Give me a minute here, folks. We have both had a little bit of challenges with our tech this morning, or this afternoon, I should say, ironically.
That makes us human.
Exactly.
Yeah, it happens to all of us.
Okay, so I'm gonna get us started, and hopefully Lindsay will come back. Hello, Lindsay. Okay, can someone confirm for me that you can see my screen? Just
Yes.
A little thumbs up.
Yeah.
So, hi, folks. We're so excited to have you join us, or I guess we're joining you because we are also just coming in from our work days. So today we're going to be chatting about what tech-enabled onboarding for MEC staff looks like. Oh, I'm sorry, folks. Okay, we're going to try this again.
Want me to try sharing my screen, Katie, now that I'm back?
That would be great. Otherwise, we'll just share the link in the chat, and folks can open it up as well. That can be maybe a good. I wonder what is funny about our Chromebooks here. Anyone with the link can view. Here we go. Just in case. Here is our. You should be able to have access to that so that we have a just in case. Okay, let's jump into things. Because I think we want to be mindful of our time. I can't. Oh my goodness. Can't confirm that anyone can hear me. Oh no. Okay, so we are both struggling with this. So we're going to pivot a little bit. We're not going to share our screens. We're going to ask you to open up the. Yeah, that would be fantastic. Thank you to the folks in the chat who are saving us a little bit. I don't know why we're both struggling with this. This is something that we will have to work on. Is it clear that we use Teams?
I can share your slides for you if you want.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, I promise we're ready.
We are here.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to start us off. My name is Lindsay. I use she and her pronouns. I am connected to UBC as an alum. I have a Master of Arts from UBC, and I actually used to work at the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology. I'm currently working in learning and development at MEC, or Mountain Equipment Company, and I have put in here my favorite current hobby is making pizza. And I do want to share that I'm coming to you today from the shared unceded territory of Halkometum-speaking Indigenous groups here in BC in the Lower Mainland. The town I live in is called New Westminster, and it's on the banks of the Fraser River, which was a very rich area for trade, and that sustained a lot of life in this area. And I'm also a treaty person. I'm originally from Edmonton, Alberta, which is located on Treaty 6 territory. And I'll pass it to Katie to introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your patience with us as we sorted out our Zoom challenges this afternoon. My name is Katie. I use she and her pronouns, and I am a co-lead of learning and development at Mountain Equipment Company with Lindsay. So we're so excited to be here. I am a current MET student. I am finishing off my 5th course, so I'm halfway through, which is very fun. And I'm also deeply connected to UBC because I used to work there. And I have studied a couple of different things in the past, including the adult learning certificate. I used to work in residence life. So if anyone lived in Walter Gage Residence, that was the building that I managed for several years. I wrote Donut Eater. I always recommend to folks to go to Fox and Oak in Squamish. I am coming to you from unceded Squamish territory. I grew up on unceded Algonquin territory and currently live in Squamish, British Columbia. So I strongly recommend our beautiful Fox and Oak donuts. I can't take credit for them. I just like them. They're down the street. I will share, just thank you for helping out with the slides here. I will share just briefly before we jump into things about Mountain Equipment Company. So the company we work for operates across the country and is really focused on getting Canadians outside. So when we talk about outside, we're also talking about Indigenous territory. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that that the stores and the company that we work for operates across the country on a variety of territories. So our global land acknowledgement is in fact the entire country. As we jump into thinking about what is Mountain Equipment Company, you probably have heard of this company. If you haven't, welcome. I'll do a little brief introduction. MEC has been around for a long time. Historically was a co-op, transitioned to a company in 2020, and Lindsay and I joined the L&D team in the new co-era, the company era. You might be asking, is it MEC or MEC? It's both. We don't have a preference, but helpful context, we are a Vancouver-based outdoor retailer, a department store that sells a variety of brands, including our own in-house brand, which is designed by our wonderful colleagues at the MEC label. And we have 25 retail stores across the country and about 1,500 staff. So we are curious to hear who is kind of in the room. And so we'd love if you could use the stamp function, which is just that little pencil on the left-hand side of your screen to identify, like, are you a staff member? Are you a student? Are you faculty? Is there anyone else? And I think Lindsay and I were both saying, like, I am staff historically, student currently, and presently also in anyone else.
Anyone else?
Okay, so it looks like we've got a few staff, some students. Are there any folks who are staff and student? I bet that is true. Okay, cool to think of that we are talking to we're talking to folks who are staff and students, and I think we are. Lindsay, the anyone else is. So we can clear the stamps and head into our next slide, which is just a route map of what we're going to be talking about today. So we have 4 different areas of our presentation. The first one is talking about onboarding and how we're going to be defining it during our presentation today. Then we're going to have an individual reflection, thinking about how tech shows up in the various onboarding experiences that we facilitate or participate in our various roles. Then we're going to talk about, of course, our MEC case study about how we use tech in onboarding and how we've made some transitions over the past couple of years, especially since all of the changes at the company we work for. And also we'll, of course, dive into some opportunity for some discussion around intentional tech usage in whatever onboarding or welcoming experiences you participate in or facilitate in your role, either as a staff member, a student, or in other workplace experiences. So I'll pass it over to Lindsay, who's going to take us through the first section.
Thanks, Katie. So first, we want to just define what onboarding means. And in our very specific context, in our current roles, we usually think of onboarding when you're coming into a new job. Maybe you're starting a new role, maybe you're starting with a new team or a new organization. You're brought in, you're welcomed into that new organization. There are a number of other ways that we can think about onboarding and the experience of onboarding that we wanted to share with you today. If you don't mind just popping over to the next slide, thank you so much. You could be onboarding into a new class. Maybe you are an instructor or support, bringing students into a new class. That's a welcoming experience. Maybe you are trying to introduce folks to an assignment. That can also be a welcoming experience. Maybe a new technology is being brought on. Maybe there's a new process that's being introduced to your team, to yourself. all of these can be considered onboarding experiences of a sort. So if any of these resonate with you, or maybe you've experienced this, maybe you've gone through a change like this recently, we think that onboarding can apply to all of these. So keep this in mind for your specific context as we go through. And also, we're trying to bring together onboarding and technology. So we do know that these two things can be integrated, and we want to make sure we're doing that as intentionally as we can, even though we know sometimes not everything is within our control. So if you want to share in the chat, we're going to be asking for some chat participation if you're comfortable with it. If you have an onboarding experience that you have either been a part of or been managing recently, we'd love to hear whether that is that a new process? Is that a new job? We'd love to hear if you have something to share in the chat. And while you do that, I will pass it back to Katie. We have decided to weave some of the participation throughout our presentation, so it's not just us chatting. But I'll pass back to Katie to kick us off with a reflection.
So now that we've kind of expanded our definition of onboarding, so hopefully it is also relevant to you in your various capacities and roles and hats that you wear. We're going to spend some time doing some individual reflection. So if you could head on to the next slide, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much for helping us facilitate this. So as we think about this question of integrating technology intentionally into our onboarding or welcoming experiences, I want you to take a minute or so to reflect, how does technology currently exist in that onboarding or welcoming experience? And then really consider, what are the goals of this onboarding and what are the constraints? And so when we were thinking about how we can talk about MEC's onboarding with folks who might not necessarily be doing staff onboarding in the ways that we are, really thinking about the goals and constraints sounded like a helpful way to think about what are we trying to get to, and is our technology helping us achieve those goals? And then also, what are the understandable constraints? And you'll hear us talk through this a little bit as well in our case study. So I will just take some time and give us about maybe 30 seconds, a minute. We would encourage you to type this out in the chat just to have some, so that we can read some of your responses. And this is an opportunity for me to stop talking and be comfortable with the silence. So I will do that. And we'll just look for your responses in the chat.
I think if people want to speak, they can use their mic.
Yes, absolutely. And we will have more of a kind of like directed discussion in our section 4. But of course, feel free to unmute and share if that's something that you feel called to do in the way that participation feels good for you. Okay, so Bree has shared in the chat. Hi, Bree, we're in a class together. Yeah, working in an office with student employees and co-op. Yes, I know that experience, especially working in the university kind of context of bringing new folks in often. I used to work in an 8-month, 4-month cycle in student housing, interviewing like 800 candidates every February. Was very time consuming and also wonderful. Oh, hello. Yeah, time constraints, no current use of technology. Yeah, I often share with folks that in developing e-learning that it takes longer than facilitating or developing facilitation
May I talk
guides.
about my onboarding experience?
Yes, of course, go for it.
Yeah, so I would say my new job actually involves facilitating education through technology. So the goal, which I love, is to produce education programs that are more accessible. And so a lot of tools are used. The constraint for me can be like, I might sometimes feel overwhelmed, like there are so many like tools and different software, and I'm like, okay, which one should I prioritize and which one should I learn first? And yeah, so that's my experience.
Yeah, I can relate to this also in thinking about our facilitation, which tools to incorporate so that we're not also overwhelming our learners or the folks that we're also onboarding into these things. Like those are real constraints as like just the level of new information that we can take in at one point. yeah, maybe we will move on to talking a little bit about our case study. So I'll pass it over to Lindsay to get us started.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everybody for sharing. I think you're going to see some similar themes come up in our specific experience that we've having to design and launch onboarding programs for our staff at MEC. So I'll start with our goal. All of our new staff to feel ready and excited for their new adventure when they come on with the company. And we have a number of technologies that staff, maybe will say they have to jump through a lot of hoops to get to the onboarding that we have for them. So they have to get access to their email. They have to make sure that all their information is complete in our HR software. We have multiple compliance training platforms. And so I'm picking up some of the themes we've seen here, like having either a lot of technology or having to gain access to a centrally managed suite can be challenging. And finally, we use a platform called Thinkific to host the actual exciting onboarding piece about, what do we do? How can you contribute? What do we stand for? Everything about MEC. And so we're going to focus just on talking about specifically Thinkific, because that is the tool that our team has control over. We currently don't have control over any of the other technology that exists in the onboarding process. So that for us is a constraint, but it's one that we have to work within. So why do we use technology, and what problems are we trying to solve, and how does this help us achieve our goal of making sure staff feel ready? So our team worked to implement online onboarding, and this was to remove very, very long lecture style days where people would come in and they would be sitting in front of a PowerPoint for upwards of a week in the past, and slowly it got whittled down to 2 days, 3 days, and we were able to condense all of the content to speed up this process, and also to give staff the chance to kind of get comfortable at home before they get into the retail store for the first time. So for retail staff, we have an online portion and then a chance for them to come into the store, meet their teammates, and participate. We actually have the reverse, or not, I shouldn't maybe say the reverse, but we have a different program for our staff who work in our home office, which is kind of the corporate center of our company. They will also participate in the online course, but they have a different onboarding that is conducted either remotely or in person in our office by our colleagues in HR. So we have two slightly different models because we're trying to make everyone feel ready, and that feels a little bit different when we have the flexibility of the retail stores, and we are wanting to build the connections among our office staff. And I will pass it over to Katie.
Thank you. And we can click on that little play button and maybe make it a little bit bigger. I want to give folks a sense. This is just a screen capture. Oh no, you can request access. Oh boy.
Oh no.
Oh, I feel like
access.
Sorry?
I mean, is it your work-related thing? I don't know if I will get the access.
It is a video that I should be able to change access on. But I think what I'll do for now is say these slides are in the chat. I encourage you to take a peek after. This basically is a short video that's a screen capture video of what the Thinkific platform looks like. If you have been in a course with me at MET, you probably have seen some Thinkific work, because I've really built upon my my knowledge of this platform through my academic studies, and I will change the access in these slides after, so folks, anyone with the link will be able to have access. But ultimately, it's important to know, because we work in a corporate context where we're applying these concepts of technology and onboarding and thinking about it not only from an education lens, but also from a business lens, that we actually have indicators and good reporting on our engagement and staff retention. And we know that since we have implemented in our retail and also corporate settings, better onboarding that includes like less time being lectured at and more time connecting with colleagues and applying your new knowledge and new skills, that we actually have increased engagement and significantly better staff retention. This has been true in our retail stores as we shifted to that hybrid model, but it's also true with our corporate home office, which I think is really cool to see. Ultimately, like I always say, if you work with me, I always say I'm here to make work a better and more positive experience for everyone. And I think that starts from before day one. We definitely have some constraints. And so that brings us to the next slide of like, not everything is perfect. I think it can be easy to walk into a beautiful MEC store and say, I bet all these people have this perfect training experience. I'm sure you think of that every time you walk into a store near you. But the reality is there are real constraints, and we continue to explore those and try to think, put on that hat of what do we have control over and what do we have the opportunity to either more explicitly guide someone through, or can we streamline all of the tech that folks have to go through. And also, like, we need compliance training. That is just the reality of the experience of staffers. And so we definitely don't want to walk in and say this is a perfect model, but it has been really cool to see, especially those engagement and retention scores for folks who have been new to the company since these changes have been implemented over the past 2 years, really, really go up. And the other thing is we use Thinkific through for product knowledge, which is training staff on the products that are being designed for MEC label by our local Vancouver-based designers. And these products are in all of our stores, and we train staff using the Thinkific platform as well. And we've seen adoption increase over the course of time. It's definitely not perfect, but it's been really cool to see that as well. So for our next little while, we do want to move into some discussion. We want to hear from you and get some conversation going, because I think that's important. So our discussion questions are, I'll pass it over to Lindsay to introduce our discussion, actually.
Sure. So if you do use technology, and maybe if you don't use technology, do you feel like, or do you have any metrics to show that the goals of your onboarding or welcoming experience are actually being met? This is our first question.
Like thinking back. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You're going to say thinking back to our earlier reflection. So thinking about the reflection where you're identifying the goals of your program and the technology you're using, do these two things actually line up? Because we've found, oh, I'll see. Oh, that's such a good question. Bree's asking,
yeah,
measuring the efficacy of onboarding. Yeah, that's a good one. Katie, did you have something you were going to share?
Yeah, it's actually a conversation that we're having about, in addition to the engagement surveys that we have, and also just retention numbers. How do we specifically report on onboarding is a conversation that we're currently having. We have, again, some real constraints when it comes to the ability for us to gather information from, and it's really about like, how do we send out a survey, for example? What platform? Because we have a variety of platforms. Who owns that survey data? And when we have a small learning and development team, there are time constraints, as Lisa, I believe, mentioned. So we are looking at making something that is hopefully a little bit more specific to onboarding. In an ideal world, that would look like implementing probably over the next 6 months, I would say, is a realistic in advance of our summer seasonal hiring, is preparing our store learning assistants, who are folks who work specifically focused on learning in the stores, and our store managers, with a process of probably a 30-day survey. And then the real question is, like, if we're going to gather that information, how do we make sure that we actually use that information? Because we're asking staff to fill out. We want to make sure that we build that trust and are acting appropriately on that information. So it really is about working with our coworkers and our colleagues across many stores. We have a very classic problem, I think, with a medium or large company. If you roll something out, you're rolling it out to everyone. I think that's an experience for folks who work as staff. At UBC, that's a very similar experience. I know I would work when I was working in a residence life population of, like 1,400 students. I couldn't start small. Like, you have to do this all the way. And so that's something that we're mindful of. We're also in a very significant period of change. And so we're letting things settle before we roll out something new. My goals are largely centered around how many questions a day I get. Yeah, absolutely. I think that is when we think about, especially working with student staff, or just like new staff who are like really eager and like excited about their role, they're going to be asking 1,000 things. And so where is an opportunity for folks to self-serve with that information? And in an ideal world, they can go back to, for example, the Thinkific module or some centrally hosted content. We use Microsoft SharePoint as a space where folks can go and access information. There are store-specific spaces that might look like Canvas in a university context, or shared drives even. How do you orient a new staff member or a new student staff to the way that you store information?
We will jump to the second question here, but I wanted to jump up in the chat a little bit here. I saw that Lisa made a comment earlier. Time constraints, no current use of technology. This was actually something that we found, was that when we were not using technology, we were able to get people in and out a lot faster because you're not waiting for the setup time. You don't have the lag time of trying to like find reporting and go into different websites and try and make sure people have access. It's very fast when someone shows up before you in person, or whether that's virtually, like in a virtual meeting, and you're able to talk through things and, maybe share some slides like that. That itself can be a huge time saver. So if you have a time constraint, maybe not using technology is actually meeting your goals, which is totally fair. And that's something we kind of wanted to bring to this conversation, is like, are we, and we ask this of ourselves quite frequently, is how can we either include or exclude technology based on our goals to make sure that the most goals are being met in the best way. I think we maybe can't always achieve all of them, but I'm curious, thinking about this question, if anyone would want to try and add technology, or maybe if there's technology you could streamline or take a step away from and see if it impacts your welcoming experience in any way.
I can speak a little to that. So in our experience, and we are staff at UBC, and we are LGDI, the unit that supports learning and technology in the Faculty of Education. It is very hard for us to keep up with the content that's in an online content for training our staff because things keep on changing. Each role has their own responsibilities. So bringing in that context of what kind of onboarding they need to have, and then humanizing that experience stays a challenge. So what we do really is, because we have a lot of work and we cannot really spend time just working on these resources for onboarding, that the human element is so important that we kind of make it a blended experience. So the staff, while our modules are self-paced, whoever is in the new role, they can go through the modules, but then it is the manager's responsibility as well as to guide them through that experience and tell them what is relevant, what is not. Another interesting thing that we do, especially with the students who come and work with us, that when their term finishes and they are leaving, we actually ask them to go through the onboarding training and update the content for us. Because the technology have changed, things have changed, they have learned a lot during that experience. And when they joined, there were gaps, or maybe something they found that wasn't up to date, and they learned something new, something they wanted to add, and leave some comments for the next onboarding with the new people. So we find that thing really time saving for us, and a way for these students to give back to us as well.
That's a cool process. I really like hearing that kind of the iterative, you still get to iterate the training to make it relevant, but you're giving the staff a chance to participate in that process. And also, as the people who probably know the roles the most closely, they're the ones who are able to make those changes. That's really interesting. I'm seeing that Bree also does that. That's very validating to hear. Yeah, I think this is, even though technology can be super, super helpful, and we've found it to be very helpful in our context, I think keeping that personal element is really important. And that might not come in the form of technology. That might come in the form of a face-to-face interaction, whether that's on a computer or in person. And yeah, it's good to keep an eye on the balance of like, what do we have? What can we use? Maybe not always a question of what we want to use, but we move with the cards that are dealt to us. We did have one final quick little, I'm just keeping an eye on the time. Yes. We have one final slide. Katie, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Yeah, so you do have, oh, sorry. So everyone now has access to these slides. And we all wear different hats and have different opportunities to onboard or have welcoming experiences that we host and facilitate. And so there are lots of questions that you probably are starting to think about as a result of attending this session, but probably haven't concluded anything. And so I want to encourage you to go back to the individual reflection questions, as well as the 2 questions that we've used for our last little bit. And consider the tech used in your onboarding and the goals of onboarding, and then ask, like, do these align? Do these make sense together? Is there an opportunity to streamline a process, or perhaps is there an opportunity to take something away? And it's so normal, I think, when we get excited about a tech tool, especially for those of us who are really interested in this area, to think, oh, I'll add this in. And then we come to that point of how do we make sure that we also don't overwhelm folks, as has come up. So I want to encourage you, if this is resonating with you at all, to go back to your team, go back to perhaps it is teaching assistants that you work with, or student staff teams, and think, how can we make our onboarding better by either implementing or removing those educational or those technical tools. I think that brings us to 3 p.m. Or 3 p.m. PST, if you're joining us from a different time zone. I want to respect that your time might be different, but we'd love to stay in touch. There you've got the links to our LinkedIn. It's always a fun opportunity to reconnect or connect with folks, especially since we're both a little bit distant from UBC these days. And I want to recognize that these slides were developed from a template from SlidesGo. So shout out to SlidesGo for being a great tool. And just thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for presenting. Amazing presentation. We learned a lot.